Incoming transmission.
Hey everybody, this is Ed with Boosting the Signal, and this week my guest is Christian Hurst. Christian is an artist, an artist, yes, an author of some amazing books, and he's here to tell us all about them. I think everyone needs to check them out. And seriously, Christian, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Technically, an author is an artist, so
And I am an artist too, so
oh, well, there you go. Well,
you're
then we'd
right
love
on
to hear
all
about that.
fronts.
I'd like to hear about the art as well. So, how are you doing? And how's it going for you?
It's really great. I mean, this is a great time to be chatting right now. There's so many exciting things happening in my world, in the world of the books, and just in general. And I really appreciate you having me on. You know, you were an early supporter when I first self-published the first book, before I even was published with Outpost Books, which is my small publisher that I'm through now in Pittsburgh. But so you've always been really supportive of my work, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, glad to do so. Yeah, that was the beginnings of the My Figure universe, and I was always my intent was always to help, let people know about everything in the science fiction world. And your book caught my attention. It was actually something that I had gifted, like sent the I had the PDF Kindle version. I sent it over to my son to read, and funny story, he had it for all of about 6 hours. He put his Kindle in his back pocket and he sat down and snapped it in half.
Oh no.
And he has yet to buy a new one. So it's like because I asked him, I told him, I said, I'm going to have Christian Hurst on. We're going to talk. I said, what did you think of the book? So I could relay
Yeah.
it. And he's like, well, Dad, here's the story. And I was like, all right, well,
Oh
so
dear.
that explains why I had never heard anything about it, but he didn't want to let me know about the broken Kindle.
Right.
So I get that. But I admit I love the first book. I you the third book, which has released on April 30th, as ebook. And now I assume that eventually there may be a physical version. I can't
That's
speak to
right.
that.
The paperback is available now. Although, so if anyone had signed up for the pre-order, it was just the ebook. Just that's because the way Amazon works, unless you pre-order through Barnes and Noble. But the the paperback is out now. Yeah, and just for everybody, if we back up just a little bit, we're talking about Lily Starling and the Voyage of the Salamander, as was the book one in the series, and Lily Starling, the Lily Starling series is what we're referring to, just which just has been something, and I'll tell you, has been rattling around in my brain for 20 years, and so it's amazing to finally see it in other people's hands, and how it's sort of evolved as I've finally published it. So it's been a fulfilling process. But yeah, the second book, Storm Riders, came out last summer, and then or early fall, and then uh, the Lily Starling and the Death Machine just released. So it's really exciting to see people's reactions to it, and especially because I wrote this as, talk about passion project, right? These are ideas that have been rolling around in my head for a long time, and um, so it's interesting to see people's reaction. I wasn't even sure if the first one would be commercially viable, to tell you the truth, because I didn't write this to hit a certain genre spot or to like try to be in a certain market space. I wrote this because it was like, this is a book that I've been wanting to write. And so now it's like, as it's evolved through the third book now, and we've sort of changed into more of a thriller um, feel for the third book. And so it's interesting to see people's reactions. Usually I'm surprised by how positive people are, because they're like, this really surprised me, but I still liked it. So
One thing that really caught my attention, specifically in the first book, and that you set a tone for, was you were creating a world unto itself. You introduce the characters, of course. Like I think it was the second chapter was just specifically introducing the salamander, and then but you also made it a point to do character breakdowns throughout the book, and I truly appreciated that. And I've been going back. I read a lot of old Star Trek novels, let's say from like the '60s and '70s, and some of them are really missing, a good breakdown explaining what something is. They kind of expect you to just know who it is. But you know if someone was to pick up your book and have no idea the characters or anything else, they're not going to be lost because you're not treating them as if they should know. You're helping them understand, and I find that it's something it's appreciated. It truly is.
Thank you for that. That is, why I part of the character of Lily is uh, you as the reader experience everything through her eyes. So having her start out in the year 2010 and then sort of end up in the future, um, it's like we get a what would it be like if we were experiencing all of this for the first time, if we were in space all of a sudden and we were around androids and we were, seeing aliens and uh, so I tried to make it very, even though it is pulpy in the tradition of space opera, I tried to make it emotionally realistic to where you could identify with Lily's feelings and emotions as she was going through all of this. So I'm glad that came through to some extent.
Oh, indeed. And the one thing that really kind of stuck with me, like specifically reading the first book, and then like I started reading the third book before realizing I needed to still go back. I had missed the second book. Lazy guy, but I they're classified as YA novels, and to me, that's fine, whatever. But I don't think I would almost be afraid that someone would say, "Oh, it's YA, that's not my classification," but it's for adults. I mean, seriously, I think really any age group would really do well to experience it. It's so good. Like I said, passing it on to my son, I have a niece that I know would enjoy it, my nephew as well. And I think that speaks really greatly to the wide array of fandom that could enjoy the stories. And it's appreciated
Thank
as
you for
well.
that.
Not
Yeah.
to use the same sentence again, but it's
And that's something that has evolved with the YA category. Like, you have to think of it in terms of the age of the characters rather than the age of the reader. Because a lot of people, like a lot of millennials, read YA. I think that's the biggest audience right now is actually millennials. So I wrote it with under 18 audience in mind, and just young people in general, but also as a what they call now upper YA crossover, which is like older characters, young adults, and then it sort of grows with you. So by the time we get to the third book, Lily is like having to deal with being an adult now instead of like coming of age. So it builds with you. But I know a lot of people who, most of my support, because I can't exactly market directly to children, that would be uh, I don't do a lot of like, I don't hang out with teenagers. Uh, and so most of the people who I know who have read the books are adults and they've really enjoyed it. I think on a lot of levels. And I try to give it some literary quality. But I have also heard of people's kids and, young people that have enjoyed it. So I try to keep both in mind. I think the one thing that I will say about the message is that for me, because whenever I start writing, I always start with two things. I start with characters and I start with themes. And the themes that I really wanted to get across in this were directed toward young people, even though I think we all can benefit from them. Particularly the idea of loneliness and being sort of true to yourself. And the more true to yourself you are, the kind of the more isolated you become. And it can be this lonely space and just that connection will happen. That's really the theme of the book is that connection happens be true to yourself, and you will find that connection eventually. And it's like, because I think kids get in this tunnel vision, where they feel trapped, they feel alone, and I want them to know that, like, those of us who were weird kids and felt like we were on the outside looking in, we made it okay, just hang in there.
And that's it's a good positive message, and I can appreciate that as well. I it's and you're right. There's all too often there's too many people and younger generations that are questioning their their place, and it's good to see something that can speak to them, as it were. Um, Out of curiosity, what was your creative inspiration for this universe that you have started?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I grew up with science fiction, and um, interesting. I grew up as raised in a religious family. I was raised in the Mormon church, and um, I always felt just a little bit like an outsider. I was a weird kid. I was always questioning. I was, that kid, and so I felt a little of that, what I just talked about, like that being an outsider. I don't resent my upbringing at all. I think my parents are awesome people. They did a great job, and everything. I'm not resentful, but I'm just saying that, like, my state of mind, I used to see people who would get up in church and they would say things like, I know this, I know that, I know this is going to happen, and very much like confident. But then later on, I might see something that pulled the rug out from under them, and I would see this pattern again and again. And so I've always been fascinated by that idea of absolutism, and how people adopt these binary thinking absolutes where it's like you are either X or Y, and very bucketed, very like, and so you put your faith in something, and instead of creating an identity from within, you create an identity externally from what people assume about you, from what people put on you, when they enter the room. And when you build your identity on that, uh, I think it creates these moments of crises of faith, crisis of identity throughout your life. Whereas if you build that strong foundation from within, uh, you may not be as prone to those things, but also it can be lonely again, because you're like kind of on an island of your own. You're not necessarily in with any particular clique or group. And so these are themes that like really resonated with me when I was young, and I read things like Les Miserables. I love Victor Hugo. I read a lot of classics. I read Ursula Le Guin, a lot of Star Trek novels, a lot, and these sort of reinforced, gave me the space to explore sort of my own worlds as a kid, and develop that strong sense of self. And so all of that is to say that these are themes that have really been important to me, and I always wanted to structure them into a science fiction world that was kind of like Star Trek in some ways, because I'm a big Trek fan, but also a little more emotionally realistic, a little less allegorical, a little more what I don't want to say believable, but like a little bit outside the Trek fantasy world, with, no transporters to escape the danger, no
No magic tools
that
to
kind
fix the
of,
day.
and so I I don't know. I just have always wanted to build this world, and you'll there are people who knew me when I was, were roommates with me or whatever when I was a younger person, who can tell you about me going on and on about these characters that I was like, I wanted to make movies about it. I wanted to make, somehow just get this out into the world, and um, so it's been a long time coming.
Well, I love the fact that you took the steps to do it because, you know, be it whatever media it is that you would your ultimate goal be film, television, book, whatever. You're taking your idea and you're putting it out there, and that in itself is that's a good example of it's a good example for the world. You're getting past any fear, and you're taking the steps to make it happen, and that's great. Um, and I think you're doing wonderfully. I don't know, I can't see sales, I can't see whatever else, but I can say this, that from as a fan, as someone that is a fan of what you're putting out there, I think you're successful. Um, and I hope that
Thank
it
you.
continues.
Yeah, it's good. It's a 5 book series, so there's two more coming, and it's growing, and the audience is growing, and I'm very grateful. I've been very overwhelmed by the response, but also just sort of happy to keep continue with it. People ask me, well, what about, are you going to sell it to a publisher? Are you going to try to get TV rights or whatever? I'm like, I would love all that, but like right now, I just really want to continue to build the world and the story, and finish that, because I'm working on book 4, and it's interesting to see sort of what was in my head a long time ago versus sort of what it's becoming now, because there are obviously things that have changed in the world. Um, when I was writing book 3, there's a backdrop in the story in Death Machine of a virus. And that was something I thought of when I was much younger. And then, of course, COVID happened. So I actually thought about removing it, because I was like, this is going to sound like so on the nose. But it still just worked really well for the story. It was something that was like, there's this pandemic. And so I just tweaked it a little bit, and tried to make it clear that this is not that story. This is, a different a different set of circumstances. But there are sort of these relatable themes about fear, and about controlling information, and about um, access to you know healthcare and that kind of thing. So different themes.
Not for nothing, but there's plenty of experience or examples in the past of science fiction that have had very similar situations to COVID. I think you're safe. I think using it, I would hope that people, and you're right, there are people that are going to say, oh, well, this, the idea came from real world, but all science fiction comes from real world in some way or form. I always like, I've been doing a, supernatural rewatch recently, and
Mm,
I get to the episode, with Croatoa, and I think, oh wow, I watched this episode, and it's so similar to what happened in the real world, and
right.
I thought, I was like, all right, well, that's scary. Um, but
I've been fascinated to write about this ever since I read uh, the Batman Contagion series. I don't know if you're familiar with it. When I
the
was
thing
like
is, I've heard it, but
14.
it's not something I have.
Yeah.
Yep, I haven't read it.
So I've been, it's a long time ago, but I I do think it's something that everybody thinks about the moment that they're living in now, and they think it's very unique. But if you read history, you know that a lot of things have happened before.
Tickle, can't even say the word. It comes back around. It's like fashion. I do want to say I do get your newsletter, and I saw recently you were bestowed upon first place in 3 categories at Bookfest. And would you like to talk about that?
Sure, that's great. I'm very proud of that. I'm very excited that the win has garnered some press for the book. The um, I think it's notable because the 3 categories were uh, main sci-fi category, space opera, and then LGBTQ sci-fi, and then YA sci-fi. So I think those are three, significant categories, because they are the three retail categories for the book. So it was really, I couldn't have been better, frankly, for the book itself. And I'm really proud of it because I won the Reader's Favorite Award last year, and it was bronze. And that was with the first edition of the book before I had worked with Outpost Books and gotten it professionally edited and like kind of we went through and did a couple rounds actually of tightening it up because there were some parts. It was my debut. I'm self-published. It was a little overwritten, I'll be honest. And so I'm really proud of the latest edition. I'm proud of it in general, but I think the latest edition is kind of the definitive edition, not to be George Lucas, but like it's very tight, and the the fact that it won bronze last year and now it won three gold, triple gold is like I think it shows that there has been progress to the manuscript, which is cool to be indie and to be able to do that because we didn't print 200,000 copies, you know. If I was through a traditional publisher, you don't get that opportunity to like go back and fix things. So
So you're telling me that, but no, Han shot first. Yeah, Star Wars reference. Sorry.
exactly.
Um,
It'll
it
be
does
worth
make me
something
think
someday.
too. You talk about tightening up the original first book. I'm thinking that then what I have is probably pretty old because that would mean because I got mine really early.
Yeah, you got yours back before I had even, yeah, back in the early days. You were one of the first people who read it, I think.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's something to add to my list to get. I and you answered one of my questions I had written down ready to go was the planned number of books, and you answered it without me even asking. Well done. And that you have 5 books planned out for the series. Now, is this set in stone, or is this something that could be fluid and change?
Well, I will say there are 5 books in this particular series. So this arc is Lily's growth from when she loses her memory to the growing as a finding herself and becoming fully an adult and then learning sort of responsibilities. And it will end, you know, with her sort of um, ready for more. I'll just say that. And I have a whole another series of 5 books also sketched out that go past this. That would be more of an adult sci-fi series. So um, I also have a lot of other ideas, and you know, I think it's interesting because I do consider myself a writer. I have a 15 plus year career of advertising and brand marketing and graphic design. And so I'm a storyteller in general. I used to do independent films. I've worked on video games. I've always written, but I consider myself more of a storyteller. Like I say, I talk about myself as an author. I don't necessarily uh, think I'm the strongest writer in the world. You know what I mean? But I'm
Mm.
a storyteller. I love to think of these ideas and see them realized. And so I just have too many ideas. That's my issue is I try to focus, you know. And so because this series has sort of taken off and people are interested in it, I want to see it through to completion. But I do have other ideas for this world, you know, things that could happen. I have a whole series about sort of like space spies that I have thought about, like a James Bond in space. I've thought about a series with the Roth Ka because they're just delightful, and I'd love to do like a middle grade series with them, the goofy engineers. Um, and so you know, I have a lot of things directions where this could go, but I'm focused on this series right now, 5 books, and then there is another series that I have sketched out with Lily, so hopefully that will happen. You know, if you guys read the books, it'll definitely happen.
Oh,
The
I think
more
everybody
people
needs to read the book.
get on.
All the books. I do. You talked about when you were younger, you had started and creating. Does make me wonder to myself, where did your literary aspirations begin? Like, at what point in your life did that come to you?
Well, My father is was a English major and is a very well-read man. He was a newspaper man, and um, his his mother was a poet and a teacher, and his father was a history teacher. So a lot of like literary upbringing. My mom was also very well read in the classics. So we read Dickens when I was little. I've just always been exposed to these things. Very into, the kind of theater as well. And I read a lot of Shakespeare. I used to have um, a good portion of the play Hamlet memorized. I don't think it's in there anymore, but I could probably recite some of the monologues to you. But so that's just sort of like my upbringing. I think it was a very literary household. My dad would uh, recite poems from memory, and I used to try to memorize stuff just because he had stuff memorized, and I thought it was cool. Um, but my brother used to read to us at lunch when I was very little. He was like a teenager, and um, we would be eating lunch, and he would, instead of eating, read. Like he read Lewis Carroll, um, you know, um, Roald Dahl. He read, just some great books. As and I don't know. That was just how we grew up. I was pretty, we were not a family of means, and we went to the library. I mean, I spent most of my time at the library, I think, when I was a
Oh, I
kid.
can
So.
understand that one. I think some of my favorite memories of my childhood are from books that I've gotten from the library. And in fact, most of the ones that I used to check out of the library the most, I've gone back in my, you know, adult years and I've purchased because,
Mhm.
I mean, I literally, a good example, there was a book named called Best Destiny. I probably checked that out of my library 8 times. Um, Probably, and that seems like a low number, but you got to keep in mind it was probably late, and I paid a lot of fines on it over those years. So eventually, I bought the book. I didn't have to get it from the library anymore, but I so love library stories. I wish more and more people would go to libraries. Um,
Incidentally, I met my wife working at a bookstore, believe it or not. So we were both in school at the time, and I was looking for a retail job, and I was like, it was Walmart or Borders, and uh, so I picked Borders, even though it was a further drive, and I was like, I got to work at the bookstore, and that's where I met my wife. So it's kind of a cool
good
thing.
choice. You
Yeah,
know, she might not have come to Walmart.
Hey, exactly.
Now, see, that would have been funny if you would have found out years in your marriage if she would have said, I just don't shop at Walmart. You would have been like, see, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you did talk about your longtime Star Trek fan. I'm curious, what's your Star Trek story? I try to ask that of everybody. What got you into Star Trek?
I am an old school Trekkie. Like my mom watched the 60s show when they would get home from school. The 60s show. The Star Trek, the original Star Trek. They call it the original series now. It was just Star Trek. Um, so she used to get home from school. They would either watch Batman or Star Trek, and I think it was already in reruns at that time. She's a little bit younger, but and she liked the goofy episodes, and so she introduced us to it when we were kids, like Trouble with Tribbles and some of the more fun ones. But then I just I don't know, I just consumed it. I loved it. I was a big hardcore like Captain Kirk fan. Um, Even into like the next generation, I used to be part of I was one of the only people my age who would side on the Kirk side of the Picard Kirk debate. But now I love Captain Picard. I've watched The Next Generation so many times, probably more than any other series now. So, but I love it all. I think it's great. I think the hopeful vision of the future is something that is unique to Star Trek in all of science fiction. Even my books get a little dystopian, frankly, because I try to make them a little more realistic, even though there is sort of this idea of the utopia. I like try to poke holes in it. But I do like that, especially the early 90s, like Star Trek: The Next Generation, and a lot of the movie stuff was very much around this idea that humans had gotten it. We conquered our demons, and now we're exploring the galaxy, and that was a very hopeful message to me when I was young. I kind of needed that, to hold on to.
You can't ask for a better origin than that. I completely get it. I I love Next Generation, and I was that the guy too. I would always pick Kirk over Picard. So, but that was before I met Cisco, and
Oh,
then
yes.
I became a Cisco guy, and then I felt like, oh well, sorry Kirk, sorry
Yeah.
Picard.
Me
Uh,
too. Like a lot of people, I think I discovered DS9 late. So I was, it was not on at the right time. And I watched all of Voyager first run. But like DS9, for whatever time slot it was in, I never saw all the episodes when it was first on the air. And so I would record some of them for those of you who are dinosaurs in the audience who know what a VHS tape is. Um, and I would watch them later, and especially when there was a special episode like the one where they go back in time, Trials and Tribulations, and um, so I always liked it, and I played the video games and stuff, but I never knew the whole arc. And then later on, when it was on DVD, I finally revisited it and watched the whole series, and was like, "Geez, this is phenomenal!" Like I think as far as series go, it has the most complete arc of any of them. So,
yeah, I without giving too much away, I'm aware of where you live, and relatively you're within. I could drive to where you live within a half a day. So you probably understood the same thing I did. Local affiliates would not play Star Trek at like 8 o'clock. We would have to wait until later in the evening. At least
yeah.
that's the way it is in my area. So, and here specifically, like for me, we didn't get Voyager the first year it was even on. So I had family out west that would record it and mail them to me, and that was the
Oh,
only way I was
wow.
able to see it for the first season. And then, like when DS9 and Next Generation were on, they would be on Monday nights at like oh, it would be like 11:30 and then midnight somewhere in there. So my parents, I'd have to say like, I have school the next day. Like, but
Right.
I don't want to miss it. We didn't have a VCR quite yet, and they're like, you can stay up, you can watch it. Even when I had a VCR, you could still stay up and watch it because I wanted to. I'd have my finger on that pause button to cut out commercials. And but the problem was I had to give up my Friday nights. So like I'd have to go to bed early on a Friday night. And they negotiated with me, true Ferengi parents. I got to tell you, true Ferengi parents. But it was well worth it. I gave up
Yeah.
Friday nights for years in my childhood because I didn't want to miss Star Trek. And I can't think of any better, show of love for a series than to say I'm not doing anything on Friday nights.
I have two great stories to tell about. So I was fortunate because I grew up in Harrisburg, and
Okay.
Harrisburg had a local UPN when they first launched UPN. They had a local UPN station, and so I got to watch Voyager first run from day one, and that was on every Wednesday. So every Wednesday, that was I had the TV, which was rare because like somebody else always had the main TV, but like Wednesday nights it was mine. Or people could watch Voyager with me, but I was pretty much the sole Trekkie. I think everybody I've converted most of my family members into like fair weather Trekkies, but I'm like the most hardcore for sure. But my story is when my brother first moved out, he he left home, for his 2 year mission that LDS Church does, and so all his stuff, we shared a room. All his stuff stayed in the room during that time because we knew he was coming back, right? It was kind of like preserved. And so there was his bed, and he had this little TV. And I was supposed to go to bed because I was like quite young. So I would go to bed, and then I was really into art at the time. So I would quietly paint in my bed to try to like not creak the floor because my parents could hear if I was like walking around. And so I would paint in order to stay awake till midnight because Star Trek The Next Generation was on at midnight. And then I would roll out into my brother's bed and turn on his little TV and like do the rabbit ears to get Star Trek The Next
I
Gen
love it.
and watch till 1 in the morning. And that's when I would go to sleep.
Yeah, so I relate. I can relate to this. Very much so. And yeah, I kind of when you talked about missions, I'm very well versed in the Mormon religion. I have very close friends that were part of the church. They are no longer. But and then an individual I'm close with that I met because he was on his mission at the time,
Oh,
and so I've always been very open. Like when I see them around, I know they're in the neighborhood. The doors are always open. It's just what Star Trek taught me. It's like it didn't matter the religion. It doesn't matter, someone's faith or creed, color, whatever. Accept them, and so
exactly.
that's the best way to be, I think.
I
But
couldn't agree more. That's
I,
I talk about it as humanism, but it's like uh practical humanism, like I don't like everybody. I'm human. Like, no, we're not gonna, we're gonna have disagreements. I can even really dislike people, but I try when I first meet somebody to see them as a person first and not immediately try to bubble up all the things that I could hate them for. It's like that first moment when you encounter somebody, how do you see them? And I always try to, I'm not perfect, but I always try to see them as a person first. And I think that Star Trek really, I mean, not like it sounds, you know, kind of cheesy, but it's true. Like Star Trek really taught me that idea that like you're going out to make first contact. They're going out into space. You have to respect these other planets' cultures and the way they are because it's you're coming in there, and they're different, and they would always like try to reach a you know common ground before becoming enemies.
don't be like Jonathan Archer and just, come in and be like, this is how it's gonna be. Uh,
I'm gonna kick you out an airlock.
yeah, exactly. And that's funny. Like to speak on that, I finished rewatching Enterprise recently, and someone that was on the podcast once told me that Archer is not their favorite captain, and I'm like, oh, how could that not be? And they explained it to me, and I was like, oh, okay. I went back and watched. I was like, they're right. He's a bit of a head. It was like
Right.
I was like, all right, I can see it
He
now. I
can be the
understand.
worst. Yeah. I think every Trek has had that they're written by flawed people, and so there's flaws in the shows, but like it's interesting because of what it aspires to be, even Enterprise, which I think has some of that like really bad early 2000s stuff in it. Like as far as like kind of a pendulum swing back with the misogyny and stuff, but the um I think the core message is still there, and I think that most of it is still like very watchable now. There's a few cringe parts, but
Now, speaking of science fiction in general, aside from Star Trek, aside from your own literary work, what would you consider to be your favorite science fiction work that's out there?
my favorite sci-fi movie is actually Children of Men. I don't know if you've seen it, but um, that I just think that movie is a masterpiece. I There are so many like literary. I've read so much science fiction, I do always cite Ursula Le Guin as my favorite sci-fi author. I think it's two reasons. I love her literary style, and also I just feel very ideologically aligned with her. Um, but as far as like a engaging story, there's just I don't know. There's just so many out there. I enjoy, as far as a more recent example, Becky Chambers, the Wayfarer series. I love The Expanse. Very good. So Battlestar Galactica is great. I mean, I love Ron D. Moore, and his work is just always good. So I don't know.
I
There's
always tell
just so
anybody if you're
much.
gonna rewatch BSG, like the Ronald D. Moore version, get the physical versions. Uh, Watch them with the commentaries. The Ronald D. Moore
Hmm.
commentaries are chef's kiss. And like, sure, you may know, like me, I've seen it 3, 4 times. Or as I like to say, all of this has happened, and all of this will happen again. So it, it's good to watch it and hear how he describes it. Um, yeah, great.
Yeah, he's such a
Oh,
smart guy. And have you seen the new Voyager documentary?
well, yeah, I'm one of the uh, people that haven't gotten their physical copy, but yeah, yeah, I've seen it.
Me
I've
too.
seen at least the digital version that was released to the
Yeah.
backers.
That's what
Uh,
I got. Yeah. But I will tell you I was a little disappointed in it, but that's putting that aside. But I will say I did enjoy seeing new footage of Ronald D. Moore uh and Brandon Braga and Rick Berman talking about those times, because they're so much more candid about it now. And it was really interesting hearing Ron talk about like um how he made a mistake, like where when he came over to Voyager, and then they had their disagreements and he left. And it was interesting to hear him talk about that, because I didn't ever know if he would really admit that his, you know, that he was in the wrong as well, because I think they were in the wrong on both sides. But I find those things interesting behind the scenes.
yeah, it was for the most part it was fun to watch. I think we could have left out the zero gravity plane footage. I don't really understand that. I don't know why our money in the Kickstarter paid for that.
Right.
Um, but whatever. And I'm not too pleased with the most recent update, uh, wanting more money so we can get another disc. But that's a
Yeah.
whole nother episode of complaints and anger. And
I I will tell you. Okay, I'm going to tell you my one beef, and
okay,
we can park it if you want. But it's I think that having the the first Star Trek series with a female captain that had some of the strongest women characters in the show, and then having the um, segment that stitched the entire film together be dudes was a mistake, because it was and I know that like uh uh what's his name who
Garrett
plays Harry
Wong.
Kim Wong.
Yeah.
I know that he was just like, I got this idea to do the space thing. Um, and like, I know that they didn't intend it for it to be like, but I think it would have been better if there had been something stitching it together that would have been like, I don't know, like women talking about how they've been inspired in STEM, or something that like related more to the show, instead of just like, hey, look, he's off doing this, he's on this airplane.
Well, not for nothing. That's like there have been better interviews by, I don't know if you know the Sci-Fi Sisters podcast or not. If you don't, anybody check them out. Sci-Fi Sisters podcast have had interviews with um, Roxanne Dawson, and they have talked
Hmm.
to people within the Voyager about what they have done outside of Voyager that were, and I'm sorry to the people that made the documentary, but these interviews by Sci-Fi Sisters were far better than anything that was in the documentary. And
Right.
um, I would have rather have seen them sit down and interview the women that were connected to it. And even like I look at Trek Culture, and Ellie would have an interview with Kate Mulgrew. These are far
Yeah,
better interviews.
phenomenal.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, and I know that they like this is it's been 6 years, since that went into production. It's a long time. And when they say, hey, we need $25 more, I'm thinking, no,
Right.
no,
I
you
know.
don't. Yeah.
I know it's the coming soon
Yeah.
forever thing. But you know, I will say that I have a little theory about they have to keep everybody happy because you want to be allowed to use Rick Berman's clips, you want to be allowed to use Paramount footage, you want to be allowed to use so that like it becomes this very kind of um it like too many it mediocrity by committee, you know, where it's like if you're trying to please everybody, that's not good documentarian, you know, philosophy. So
You need to tell a concise story and not worry about, what beats you're hitting. There
yeah,
are
it
far
didn't have a
better
perspective. Like the I really liked uh what was the one Shatner did with
captains.
the bridge?
Captain.
The oh the
Oh,
captains. Well, that was amazing. But Chaos
yeah.
on the Bridge?
Yeah. Chaos on the Bridge.
Right,
Wonderful
low
documentary.
budget, just some little like animated clips and stuff stringing it together, but it was so good and so like biting. You know, it had this like you had to watch through the whole thing. It wasn't too long. It just had like really interesting information.
I've talked about it a few different times and probably in nauseum, but have you ever seen the Center Seat documentary by
Oh, absolutely. That was part of the reason I didn't like the Voyager documentary is because there was nothing in that that wasn't in the center seat, and I had already seen that.
yeah, the Center Seat I think is the I don't know. I think that's the epitome of Star Trek documentaries. And
Yeah,
I'm not kissing butt or anything on to Brian. Brian's a great guy and he's doing a great job. Um, but like I've been on other podcasts. I'm looking at it right now because it's on my show. But I've been on other podcasts where I've told people, you gotta check this out. It's worth it. Specifically
yeah.
because and it harkens back to the Voyager documentary. Okay, so now here are these other interviews they want to give us on a bonus disc. We just need $25 more. Now, I think to the captain's or the center seat documentary, there is a fourth disc in that set that
Uh-huh.
was free if you buy it physically. That is the last interviews with Leonard Nimoy, Kirstie Alley.
Oh wow.
It's like the then it's uncut. It's the entire set down with them, not edited or anything else. That was an amazing, amazing extra that
Yeah,
and like I've talked to Brian about it and he said he did it because the world needed to see it, you
right,
know, and I can appreciate that. And then when I have somebody saying, "Hey, we have this. You want to watch
right,
Robert Beltran talk for another 10 minutes?"
right.
No.
Not really.
All right. Christian, this is amazing. Before we get ready and wrap everything up, I'd like you to tell everybody a couple of things. First, where can they get the books?
Yeah, Lily Starling Series is available wherever you buy your books. You can get them online in any store, or you can either ebook, paperback, or hardcover. The third one comes out in hardcover in a few weeks. Um, if you are getting them in a physical store, you may have to ask the store to order them if they don't stock them currently. But if you want to just go to my website, it's lilystarlingbook.com or seahurstpublishing.com. It's the same website.
All right, it'll definitely be on the screen for everybody to see, and down below, clickable links. I think everybody needs that. Don't let these pass you by. Friends, they're good gifts for family, especially readers. I cannot recommend them enough. And then as for you, Christian, where can people find you on socials?
Yeah, you can find me at Seahurst Publishing on Instagram and TikTok. That's where I'm the most active, especially Instagram right now. Um, And on Substack, that's the official Lily Starling newsletter, which is christianhurst.substack.com. So,
All right. Make sure everybody has those links too and can do those and show us the book one more time so we know what they have an idea.
yep,
And
Lily Starling and the Voyage of the Salamander. And I will also say that the audiobook is going to be out very soon
oh,
with
really? All right.
stage and screen actor Aaron Mello Pryor does the narration, and they are amazing. So everybody should check that out when it's on Audible very, very soon.
Sweet. I like that. That's really cool. I appreciate the heads up. Sir, it's been great. I appreciate all of your time and thank you so much for coming on and telling us all about everything. And I wish you nothing but wonderful future for these books. I can't wait to see how everything goes. And thank you so very much.
Absolutely. Pleasure.